The recording. Welcome back to another episode of Miyazaki and Me. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Cheyne.
And this time we are joined by two very special guests.
Well, I'm James. I do wrestling things, which now I know Kyle. And Boone and I were roommates for a short period of time in which we plowed through the entirety of the Studio Ghibli canon. So we've been excited to come on and talk about it.
And I am Boone, the aforementioned. I also do wrestling things. And yeah, we did. We went through the whole thing and did the whole ranking deal, and I think loved every second of it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying like our journey going through these so far, because like a lot of them I hadn't seen before. And so it's been some pleasant surprises. And like this one, in this episode, we're reviewing Ocean Waves, which I had no idea what this movie was about whatsoever, and I'd never seen it. So it was a really pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I didn't know this movie existed until fairly more recently, being as this was a TV movie created by Studio Ghibli. It's also the first Ghibli movie to not be directed by Takahata or Miyazaki.
Yeah. And then so this was released in 1993 on television, as we said. Other movies that were released in 1993, animation wise, we actually had A Nightmare Before Christmas and Batman: Mask of the Phantasm were both released in 1993.
Ooh, Mask of the Phantasm, very nice.
And something that is very timely on the television side, 1993 was the debut of the Animaniacs.
Oh wow!
Yep. Animaniacs, Beavis and Butthead, and Rocko's Modern Life all debuted in 1993.
Wow.
So 93 was a good year for animation, is what you're saying.
Yes, it was.
Now I have a very serious question for the group here that has ended friendships before. Nightmare Before Christmas, Halloween movie or Christmas movie?
Ooh, Halloween movie.
Really? Okay.
I feel like I'm gonna abstain. I Nightmare Before Christmas has never been my jam one way or the other, and I don't know why. I don't know. I've never it's never kind of lodged in my heart like it has for a lot of other people. So I tend to abstain when the question comes up and just say whatever you would like it to be.
See, to me, it's always been a Christmas movie. It's always been one around Christmas because, I mean, the movie itself takes place right after Halloween.
Yeah,
Well, I guess
that's fair.
Yeah, but you know that is not the movie we are talking about today. We are talking about Ocean Waves, which is directed by Amami Mochizuki. And this was, like we said in the preface of this is the first Studio Ghibli movie that is not directed by Miyazaki or Takahata.
And to me, the thing that's really interesting about this is, like, in that it was given over so much to the younger directors and animators, and the fact that Mochizuki has done other things outside of Studio Ghibli with like Nippon Animation and some of the other like art houses, Perot and Sunrise is super interesting to me. And the fact that he'd done some other things that are like big that I think that people would know, like Ranma One Half. To me, there's like all of these things that I don't know. I felt like because this was not as widely, I don't know, received as other Studio Ghibli works, I feel like he and a lot of the other people kind of had their rising stars cut off at the knees when, in reality, if you look at even Miyazaki's first directorial debut, like his son's directorial debut, Earthsea wasn't really all that well received either, but he got another chance and made, I think, one of Boone's favorite Studio Ghibli films.
The Cat Returns.
You're a terrible person.
I love it.
Yeah, it is weird, like, looking at it, though. Yeah, like, Mochizuki doesn't return to Studio Ghibli, but the writer of this movie, which is Kori Nakamura, who now goes by Kiko Naiwe, returns to Studio Ghibli actually for Tales to Earthsea. And then would continue writing the screenplays for Tales to Earthsea, Secret World of Arrietty, Up from Poppy Hill, When Marnie Is Me, and is actually the writer on the upcoming Earwig and the Witch.
Yeah.
So they liked what she did for sure. Yeah. So what were your guys' overall thoughts on this film itself as we kind of go into that discussion?
For me, like, being of the younger generation, it was very, like, it had a very familiar feel with like interactions that I had in real life, different things that I had gone through. So it was very easy to relate to, and just the real world feel of the friendship that separates but comes back together over a girl, but it's never really talked about, and just the overall, like, having feelings for somebody but never saying anything or never really making it clear, and until long after. And for me, having gone to Japan earlier this year, all the subway station shots and the shots of the city and all that, really kept me super engaged, because I thought they depicted it so perfectly. And I could feel like I was in that moment when I was watching that movie, and it really just kept me hooked. And it was definitely one for, I think, a younger generation, but I loved it. I have it as like number 4 of all the Studio Ghibli movies. I could rewatch it over and over.
Yeah, I would agree. I really love the slice of life Studio Ghibli movies. I think even more than the fantastical, even kind of the fantastical, I err on the side of ones like like Kiki's Delivery Service, where there's something magical about the world, but by and large it's set in a kind of familiar setting. So things like Wind Rises and Whisper of the Heart and Grave of the Fireflies. Totoro's still my favorite, even though I think that Boone and I disagree on that. I love the simplicity of stories that are slice of life and don't feel like they have to have a huge like overarching narrative, that they can just end in some ways. And that ending isn't always cathartic. And so I think that Ocean Waves is really interesting. I think that it has some faults. I think that there's a really interesting kind of undercurrent about like male friendship as well, or even like being attracted to people of the same sex, and some of those dynamics in kind of figuring that out in high school, and people starting to date and there being jealousy, even if it's completely platonic, that there's this kind of strange like rivalry that happens between friends, significant others, and yourself, because we get so laser focused on I think the idealized notion of romance when we're in high school, and everything's going to last forever, even though forever is usually about 3 weeks. Yeah, I don't know. There's something about Ocean Waves that's so engaging, and I one of the things that I love about it is that the music is so like late 80s, early 90s, but that it has that like Studio Ghibli, like there's only a couple themes. Like there's not a whole bunch of crazy stuff. There's like so many good little callbacks throughout the entire score, which is another one of those things like was not done by Joe Hisaishi, the guy that does has done almost all of the Miyazaki directed Ghibli films, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep. Shane, go ahead with your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what was said already. I also really liked this movie. I'm another big fan of slice of life type of animes, and what was nice about this one is that th- I enjoyed the length of this movie because I felt like it was the exact size that it needed to be to tell the story that it did, and I think it did a proper telling of that. Like it wasn't it's one of the few movies that I've watched lately that hasn't felt either too short or too long. Like when it ended,
Hmm.
it felt like that's when it should have stopped, and it did, and it was great. Um, so the pacing and the timing of this film was very well done. The watching a lot of Studio Ghibli lately made the beginning of this film a little weird for me because it felt like the artwork took a step back, but then as I was watching it, I realized that it didn't. It's just it's a different style for the background animation than what I had been used to in the last few Ghibli movies, where they did a lot more of kind of watercolor kind of
Hmm.
feel in this one, where
Hmm.
it's a little more pastel, a little more watercolor. Everything that they were around kind of looked like it was taken out of a painting rather than made for an anime. And that was actually, as I was watching the movie moving on, it was really refreshing and kind of fun to see the new environments that they came to.
Yeah, even some of the kind of matted transitions with the smaller picture with white as things are
Yep.
coming into focus as he's like remembering these different times, and then it actually blows up that kind of smaller frame to the full screen. There's some really beautiful kind of techniques about kind of whether something is in the present or the past, and yeah, and I think for a television animation movie, doing something that was distinct, that didn't necessarily rely on, like you were saying, the more kind of cell animated film animation was really refreshing for me.
Yep. Yeah, and I wanted to point out that little like that matte at style, like it almost made it things feel like an art print, like something almost
Hmm.
in a gallery. Like this was, just a snapshot of something in the main character's memory,
Yeah.
and bringing that forward, it's like at first it was a little jarring just because I hadn't seen that technique used before, but then
Hmm.
I started getting used to it and actually kind of liking it towards the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's also something that's a pretty nice carryover from a lot of the movies that I guess maybe I grew up in, but I'm thinking about the kind of 80s and 90s, and a lot of directors in the states that were doing live action, like the John Hughes and Robert Zemeckis and Cameron Crowe, like all of these directors that did a lot of kind of like teen focused dramas, comedies. That there's like a real presence to the like unlikable, naive, and idealized like idea that you should make terrible friendships or relationships work, and that we remember these things much differently with a little perspective on on like
Yeah.
how we should invest ourselves in other people, and other institutions, like schools or jobs or college.
And I liked having, like there was the little bit of drama at the beginning with the, you know, how upset the main character was about the school canceling their trip because they had to focus on, being better students. And there was like, oh, is that going to be a kind of an overtone for this movie? And then it didn't seem to stay that way. It kind of, there was like little bits and pieces of drama and different stuff. And typically with like Studio Ghibli movies, when that last maybe like 10 minutes feels like such a roller coaster. Like when you have things like From Up on Poppy Hill or like Whispers of the Heart, like you're on that roller coaster in that last 10 minutes of like, oh my god, it's all coming together. But this kind of like it tapered off so gently, and the way it wrapped up just felt good, and you didn't need that like, oh my god, you didn't, there was no wild reveal. I mean, the little bit of the reveal of the them coming back together, but that it didn't feel huge, but it felt satisfying.
Well, they did a really good job of hinting towards that train scene at the beginning where
Mhm.
he thinks he sees her and he's not certain. So when it happened at the end there, in my mind I was just like, is he going to yell out to her? Was he going? And then he just runs
Yep.
across to go see her, and it was a satisfying way to kind of complete the arc of the movie, um, of him running to go and speak to her when he hadn't really run to do anything
Yeah.
in a romantic sense with her throughout the entire movie. I really liked the way that they portrayed this lead character. I mean, there's there's the difference of culture where I was definitely like throw him away the second he slapped her, but I also know that it's that has a lot to do with Japanese culture and how a
Mhm.
slap isn't as big of a deal, from a man to a woman, and it's maybe at this time. I'm sure now it's probably changed a bit, but during the time this came out and people of a certain age, it wasn't. And to me, my brain went right to like, all right, screw the lead character, he's gone from me now. When he smacked her, but obviously that's not a deal breaker here. But yeah, no, Taku. There's a lot of little moments there where some of them you think that he's trying to help his friend and like he's holding back for his friend, and other ones you just and it's a little bit of seeing me in the past of being like, oh, I don't even think he realizes what this girl's doing. Like I don't even think
Yep.
he realizes that she's hitting on him or attracted to him. He's just dumbfounded because he's young.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I,
one
I
one
think that the thing.
oh, go ahead, James.
I was just going to say, I think that the thing that's really missing for me in this movie is the fact that Yutaka fades to the background so much that he's used more as a prop, in some ways. I think like we do in a lot of American film and animation to move the story along with Rikako and Taku, but in other ways, like I think if you flip it and you don't think of the if you don't think of the anime as about the boy and the girl, but like the relationship between the two guys, that I actually thought that the ending was incredibly unsatisfactory. It felt like super tacked on to me that they would just like somehow end up together. There's that weird kind of like audio montage when they all go to the castle afterwards after Yamao declares his Yamao or Tamao, he declares his love for Yumi, and
I
then
laughed a lot at that scene.
I love that. And then he's like walking through the indoor mall as they're walking along, and he's like, woo! But like they get to the castle, and then like all of a sudden he's just like, oh, this would have been so nice to have her here. And then like there's all these quotes about basically everything that they experienced together. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I happened to see her in Tokyo, and oh, like she happens to still be there. It felt like contrived in a way that the rest of the movie wasn't. I don't know if that makes sense.
I can see what you're saying there. I mean, I think that my biggest issue in the same kind of vein that you're coming from is that it felt like Yutaka's storyline never finished. Like they
Mhm.
never gave me a satisfying conclusion to Yutaka, outside of him and Taku sort of making up and going for the walk together. But it wasn't a satisfying conclusion for that character who did feel, at a certain point in the movie like they just kind of threw him away and used him as a plot point when
Yeah.
really he should have been a main crux.
Yeah, and this is also the interesting thing about knowing so little about the film going in. Like I actually was almost thinking for a little bit, it's like, wait, is this film actually going to be more about Taku and Yutako? Oh, like like their relationship than this romantic relationship. So that was really interesting as well.
Yeah, it completely lays bare just how kind of toxic our notions of like men being friends, or like men showing affection for one another in
Yeah.
American culture, like is just not a part of cultures in other parts of the world. Because I could have seen the entire story ending with them going for a walk and basically like that being the end. Like you're left with a will they, won't they between the two of them, or will they resolve it, or do they have romantic feelings for each other, rather than the like I saw her again at the train station and she was still there when I went over, and then she smiled and laughed. It's like it was such a strange, like non-slice of life ending. Like, if that makes sense, like it just didn't feel like it hit with the same beats that the rest of the narrative hit with.
I suppose you could say it was more of it. It was what truly made it a TV movie rather than a Studio Ghibli kind of release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it felt
I
like they had to do a satisfying kind of conclusion to all storylines rather than, end it in a way that maybe a normal Studio Ghibli that's released would be done.
Yeah, I think Cheyne will agree with this, because we actually had a discussion about this on the last episode for Porco Rosso. And one of the faults that we had with that film, that is not as evident here, is we kind of had a complaint that Porco Rosso didn't know what tone to strike as far as like what age group to aim at. Like it had, aspects that were a little kiddie at some points, but then, there had some more adult. And like this very much feels like it's very much aimed for, that late teens, early 20s and beyond, age group, and really set that tone really well.
I think
it had a very reminiscent quality to it.
Yeah, I think that was the best thing about watching it with Boone being like 10 years younger than me, is that it hit different for both of us, but it definitely both hit different, I think, than it would have. And, like, I'd love to hear what you guys think too. Like, if I had watched it 10 years ago, or if I'd watched it like, around when it came out when I was still in high school.
Yeah, I wonder how I would have felt about it like when I was still in high school, instead of having grown up a bit, and now being in my mid 20s. Like being in my mid 20s watching it, it still hit me, in the way that I think they were kind of gearing it towards. But I was able to really relate to it on that way, but kind of reminisce instead of like, oh, this feels like my life right now.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it in that aspect, and I feel like I was a demographic they were trying to hit.
Yeah, and that's it's funny because thinking about when where they were in their career as young animators and directors and everything, and then I think the original book was also written by someone like in their 30s, that the screenplay was based on, and I believe she wrote like a sequel as well that was like the it's not Ocean Waves. What's the original? Like I Can Hear the Sea.
I Can Hear the Sea is the original, and then I Can Hear the Sea 2 Because There Is Love is the sequel.
Yeah, and that didn't they make that, but they made that like a TV drama, like non-animated.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, which is super interesting to me. But in some ways, like I feel like I haven't seen that, but it would be interesting to see that written a little bit later, directed later. I don't know if it's kind of set up with or how kind of how the characters work, but I think it's really interesting because when I watched it, I didn't reminisce back to those times. I reminisced back to like when I was a couple years out of school and went to my first like high school reunion. Well, my only high school reunion really at this point, but But thinking about that now and thinking about like this would have been my 20-year high school reunion this year, and thinking about how I would feel like going and seeing some of those people again, it was really interesting to see their little like kind of immediate reunion and people like
Yeah.
confessing, their crushes on one another, and it's all kind of like very funny, but all still kind of very like high school.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. This year would have been my 15, or next year would be my 15 if it were something that were going to be happening. Um, and yeah, it kind of makes me think of that kind of regard too, of how people revert back into a mindset when you're around certain people.
Hmm.
Was that reunion kind of feel gave it? Um, it also made me laugh because his reaction to the um, I don't know what was she like, the student leader girl, um who then later on was saying like, oh yeah, I ran into Rikako and
Oh yeah, yeah,
this and that, and then his reaction of like, oh, did you say I miss you so much and it's great to see you? Because
yeah,
and the way he said that was very much like, oh yeah, he knew that she hated him, hated her, so that's great. um
yeah,
and it's just like that idea that, and then she said it so well right after that, of we were young, it's being mad at people back then is stupid because we were stupid, and
yeah.
it's
And
true.
that like everybody feels like their life is very hard, even though it really it really isn't in a lot of ways. But when you're going through that, um, it's really easy, I think, to look back and feel nostalgic about people that you might have known at that time, and that all of the things that were so catastrophic in the moment are really just these incredibly minor things. I mean, like talking to my mom about some of the things, the drama from high school, which was kind of like, I don't think I led a real drama filled high school life, but it was so funny, the things that she remembers me being, um, you know, upset about, or, kind of a big deal, and looking back and being like, oh man, like, I don't even know if I've talked to that person since high school.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things, like, just, this was a more major change, but like you see the thing that when Ryokoku goes to visit her father, like the
hmm
thing that she was most kind of disappointed about and like fixated on was the fact that like he changed the color of like the walls. Like he repainted the walls. I don't like green, you know? And it
Like, I
was
want to see my room.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like little things like that that you realize, like, as you're younger, she wasn't fixated on the whole, the parents got divorced, the father's moving on. She's just fixated on, oh, my room changed.
Yeah,
Hmm.
change is hard when you're young, and it's kind of a pointing that out, and also it, I think that also shows the that certain changes are really hard on the youth, and the fact that they don't know how to react to it.
Yeah.
So they young people find, I see, and I saw it myself when I was young too, that you would react to things that are little rather than the big things because you don't
hmm
really want to accept the big change.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
What did
So
you guys just watched only yesterday, right?
yes,
Yes.
And so like I feel like that's another slice of life movie, but it came out a couple years before this, and obviously, like we said earlier, it was a film. How did you guys, I mean, how did you like that in comparison to this?
Shane,
hmm.
you go ahead first. I like to me they're in the same. I might have liked this a little bit more,
Mhm.
just because I think I related to the characters a little bit, um, easier, because only yesterday, has such a dramatic shift, in
Mhm.
ages,
Yeah.
of focusing on fifth grade in you, and 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 then figuring that out to how that coincides with your modern interpretation and like your memories and everything from those times. But yeah, I think I liked this a little bit more just because I think it was more focused on the specific, age group and like specific time period.
I think as a movie, Only Yesterday is the better movie, but it was easier for me to relate to this one more. Only Yesterday has a lot of um, it dives into the way the Japanese culture a little bit more and the way they grew up in Japan that just doesn't resonate with me because it's very, very different from my past. While this one, it's based in the it's based in the cities. It's based in a couple larger cities with Tokyo and um, Kochi. Um,
Kochi.
which are both larger cities, and I can relate to how the characters were reacting and what they were doing in their everyday life a little bit more than I could in Only Yesterday. Now, with that said, like I said, I think that Only Yesterday is the better movie of the two. I think it's more complete. It feels it, just it, it had the bigger budget, and you could tell in the animation. I think is a good way to say it. Like it was a prettier movie, even though I enjoyed the way they did this one, like I said, with that kind of feeling of the background being paintings. Only Yesterday was just such a beautiful film in all the in the scenes of the fields and the big difference in the artwork between the younger and the older main character. It was just overall just a great visual what yeah.
And actually, speaking of Only Yesterday, one of the things I was going to bring up that actually Connor brought up when we were talking about Only Yesterday was I liked the fact that they did actually focus with Rikoku and Taku with the differentiations in the dialects and the accents of different regions in Japan. Because we found out that they didn't do quite as good of a job with that in Only Yesterday, at least in the English dub. But we've got this was was the original Japanese audio track, and because it has not ever been dubbed into English,
It was supposed to be.
it was supposed to be, but it hasn't been done yet.
Ryan Reynolds and Thomas Jane were supposed to be part of the dubs.
Oh.
They were supposed to play the two leads of Taku and Yutaka.
Huh.
Which would have been
Interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting is the best way to describe that. Like, I don't know if I like that or not. Like, I'd listen to it, but then I think I'd go back because they're just such older voices, especially for Thomas Jane.
And it was 2008, and Thomas Jane has sounded like he was 30 when
he came out the womb.
Yeah.
I think it's also really interesting that like Only Yesterday and even this, I think, would be much different if it would have been Miyazaki directing, because Only Yesterday is a Takahata jam, like directing and screenwriting. And I think that the other thing is one of the things that stands out for me about both Only Yesterday and Ocean Waves is they're also not a Joe Hisaishi score. Like, they feel really distinct from, I think, a lot of the movies that people think about when they think about Studio Ghibli, because it's always Miyazaki and Hisaishi.
Yeah, that's for sure. This one, as you were saying with the music earlier, this one was nice, but it was very much it did have a very, to me, late 80s feel with the music, while at the same time being kind of a weird orchestral late 80s kind of feel, which was it's kind of odd to put, like, whenever they were doing something that was fun, it had this upbeat kind of bounce that, like, to me made me think of every animated a thing I've seen from the 80s. Like it was
Mhm.
whether
That
no matter
like
what type of movie.
awkward synth jam,
Yes, exactly.
like from the beginning, like right after he sees her on the when he sees her on the platform, it does that kind of like romance relationship jam that the first couple notes sound like Moon River, but then he's in his apartment, like getting ready to leave for the actual train to go back, or the plane to go back for the reunion. And it has that like synth, like funky jam that you were talking about that just like smacks of like 80s synth animation, which is super funny.
Yeah, and this is actually one of only two films that the composer worked on. The composer is Shigeru Nagata, and it's just this and a film called Here Is Greenwood. And yeah, so this is their last composing work.
So I've taken to while watching Studio Ghibli movies, looking for the Ghibli Easter eggs, and I noticed two while watching it, and I've read about a third one. Did you guys notice any Studio Ghibli Easter eggs in the movie? And I'll tell you about the three that I know about if you guys don't.
I don't think so.
Oh, I don't think so either.
So right before they go to Hawaii, he was talking to his family at the dinner table, and he goes to watch TV. And on the
Oh, yes.
television, there was a commercial for, I think it was
Oh,
cassette
yep.
tape, and it was
Yep.
Ghibli Max.
Yep.
Was the name of the cassette tape. And then the other one that I noticed while watching was while they were at the school festival.
Yep.
Sitting at one of the tables at the festival was Porco Rosso.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you just see this the pig head and ears in a trench coat and the fedora, and it's like, yeah, I saw that right before that scene started, and I was like, where is it? I gotta see it.
Oh, I noticed it while the scene, because it was a wide shot, and I just like my eyes like went right to him because I had just watched Porco Rosso, so I was just like, wait a second, okay. Fun. But I did miss that apparently near the end of the movie there is a poster for Porco Rosso on the wall in one of the scenes. And I missed that one while watching.
Yeah.
But yeah,
yeah, the dual Porco Rosso references make sense because Porco Rosso would have just come out, just before this. So,
but I think it's
They
always
were just trying to give Porco Rosso a big push at this time,
yeah.
I get it.
The one thing that was a little interesting, probably a negative, was this is the first time we get kind of fan service for a Ghibli film, because while the girls are playing tennis and it just close up on a bouncing pair of breasts, and it's like, this is weird for a Studio Ghibli movie.
I get what you're saying there, but it was perfect for the minds of teenage boys. So like it didn't even come off as fan service to me. Like to me it was just like a bunch of teenage boys in high school looking, because even the I keep forgetting his name, Taku. Even Taku kept like when he looked, he's like, yeah, they're big, and they're like, no, we're talking about her, and he's like, oh, and she's playing tennis really well, and it's just one of those things of like, yeah, of course the teenage boys are talking about the big boob girl, like that's just what teenage boys do. They have a one-track mind.
Yep. I did, but in that I did like the fact that they for Rikoku they made her a more three-dimensional character, in the fact that like she was like the 12th ranked student and very like smart and athletic, as opposed to just being she's pretty and she's new and that's why everyone has a crush on her. It's like that was a factor, obviously, because it was teenage boys, but it was nice that it's like, oh, she's not just a pretty face. That's good.
Yeah, I liked that extra dimension where she is smart, she is athletic, but she clearly doesn't have the best upbringing or the best way that she's currently in with her parents, and seeing you would kind of get why somebody in that situation would act the way that she does, because everything's seemingly in constant change, and she's unhappy with her current situation. But I think with that culture, the importance on school and the importance in stuff like that, and seeing her have that extra dimension, I think made her more likable than the constant where you're like, how can you like this other character? She's but when you add that to her, there's okay, there's something more here to her that there's a reason Taku sticks around. There's a reason Taku is still invested and helps when he can. It's because there's more to her than just the pretty face.
And I thought it was interesting. It was kind of a throwaway line the way that they put it out there, but when she distanced herself more and more from everyone after their fight, he mentioned that she just kept going up in the rankings for studies, as in she had by not talking to other people, she had just kind of drowned herself in her schoolwork, which was also kind of an interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Go ahead,
Go
Shane.
ahead. No, you go.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say it was also interesting the fact that and one of the reasons why I think that their relationship works is she is kind of so reserved around so many other people, but then as we talked about with dialect stuff and even borrowing the money, she is very blunt with Taku, right away, and it's like, you sound like you come out of a samurai movie and stuff like that. And she's like, stuff she wouldn't dare to say to anyone else, but she says it to him.
Yeah, I think that the line in that is even, what is it? Accents are only used in dramas or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
You're in a drama is this lovely little meta comment that just kind of hit just right in that moment.
Yeah, and then I mean he throws it right back at her, saying the Tokyo accent to him sounds really harsh.
Which I've had that exact same conversation with friends that come from the East Coast when I lived down on the Gulf Coast, and we would oftentimes misinterpret the tone of what we were saying as a result of some of that just kind of cultural dialectic difference.
As someone who has family in Boston or in New England, everyone from Boston sounds like they're just being a dick all the time. So yeah, I can get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any final thoughts on this movie? I think we've really did a good job of really covering the meaning and the feeling behind it. But what's the final thoughts? What's your walk away idea of this movie?
Boone?
For me, I have it at number 4 on the whole list of everything of all the Studio Ghibli movies, and I think for me I don't know the necessarily the message that I got out of it, but it's relatable, where you have the fantastical of every Tales from Earthsea and the Moving Castle and stuff. You have all those beautiful images and fantastic things to keep your eyes on. This was something that if you lived through something like this, or you had any type of connection like this as a teenager, this resonated with you, and you felt I was able to get lost in this movie, and I don't always, tend to enjoy sub stuff, with the original track. But this, I couldn't take my eyes off. I was hooked. I, never once got distracted, and I was I was in it the whole time. I think this movie does a fantastic job of hitting its target audience, and showing the throes of teenage, everything that goes on as a teenager: love, friendship, working a job, being successful in school, and figuring out your life after that, and realizing that sometimes the things in high school don't, carry on afterwards, but you can always come back to them in the right moment. So I loved it. I can't say enough good things about it.
I think that if I were to change one thing, I would basically have it end either with the scene on the pier, like having that happen either after the reunion, or somehow kind of re-examining that. I watched a really great review that said, if they were going to switch something, they would switch the two train scenes, so that the beginning was them like seeing each other and meeting in person. At the end was them like seeing each other and not getting together. Like, to me, that has that like Say Anything vibe, um, with Lloyd Dobler and Diane, the like valedictorian, and their star-crossed lovers and everything, and they like get on that plane and they're flying away, and it's kind of like it feels a lot like The Graduate, where spoilers for anybody who hasn't watched movies from the 80s or 60s, but when Elaine and Benjamin like elope and they're on the bus and they're driving off, and like they're all happy, and then their like smiles kind of slowly fade. I think that there's something about the kind of melancholy nostalgia of this movie that, like Boone said, just hits just right. But the weird kind of saccharine ending just fell a little flat for me. And that's all to say, man, what a missed opportunity. When we're talking so passionately about the amount of accuracy and kind of emotional nuance of a 75-minute movie that's on television, that yes went over budget and went longer than it was supposed to, but man, so much potential in that younger generation at Studio Ghibli. I think in both directing and writing, that they didn't all get another shot at it, or a animated films budget. Man, I would have loved to seen some of the things, and I know that some of them have gone on and done other things. Mochizuki has directed other other work, but yeah, it's one of my favorites too, just because it's so relatable, and there's so much, I think, potential in all of it, that you can have so many different readings of how that love triangle works, and just how memory works and how you represent it on screen. Yeah, just a lot of love for Ocean Waves.
Yeah, for sure. Like a different aged me, as we were talking about earlier, would have completely thought differently of this love triangle, and where this movie goes with it, and why the characters react the way they do in certain scenes. Like, if I watched this at the age that the characters in the movie were, I would have just been like, what's her problem the whole time, rather than been like, man, he's dumb. But
Yeah.
In general, yeah, I very much enjoy this movie. I don't really know where I'm gonna put it on my rankings of the Ghibli movies so far. I think it is I think it's higher than no, I'm not going to say, because we're going to do another ranking episode.
Yeah, that's literally our one of our next episodes, a few episodes from now.
So I'll keep that out. But very much enjoyed it. I enjoyed the nostalgia kind of feel of what these characters were going through, and how they were reacting to things, and just knowing the way that I reacted to very similar situations, being so I did a lot of the same things. um and yeah, I think that this is just it's a nice short film to watch. And as Boone was saying, when it comes to, I don't watch a lot of subtitled, because I generally get too distracted, and so I can't pay attention to everything going on with subtitled. This one, I think it had to do with the content of it, and the flow of the movie itself, but it was easy for me to really keep up with both the subtitles and what was going on in the movie while I was reading.
I'll
uh, so
say, we watched them all in English, but I've watched all the ones that have been released in the US with subtitles, and I've gone back through now and watched all the ones that they have the original dubs available on HBO Max. And well, I think that they do a good job by and large of picking people out to do the dubs. I would agree with what you guys said earlier about Only Yesterday, in that if you watch Only Yesterday with the original, um, you know, dub and not the kind of English dub, I think that these movies carry so much more nuance in like native speakers, in the same way that English inflection is just different in the way that we express something. And I think that that's why it was also incredibly relatable, because there are tones taken in this film that I don't think that I've taken in 15 years. Like there's the audacity in some of their voices and the way that they
Mm-hmm.
react to each other that is so genuine, and such good voice acting, that I think that sometimes we miss out on that. And so I would say, Boone and I even talked about doing it, like going back and watching some of our favorites, or ones that we like ranked highest, that we watched in English, going back and watching a couple of those, and then like re-ranking, and seeing like whether things moved up or down based on some of that. So
Yeah.
for what it's worth.
Well, and it's also interesting, like when we're talking about the tone, it is almost a little weird how, and it's why I'm kind of actually interested to watch some of the Kiko Nawai written films later on, is because there's a tone with the script, like the fact that there's a line in here as things are getting a little bit overly melodramatic in the Tokyo hotel room, of the fact that you actually have Taku say this whole thing is starting to feel like some bad soap opera. And it was like, it was just self-referential enough that it's like, yeah, it is kind of starting to feel that way. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I was you were starting to lose me, but that kind of pulled me back. And like that's when he then sleeps in the tub, and all that stuff. And then but yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't know exactly where it's gonna rank when we go around to do it again, but I enjoyed this a lot, and actually this discussion has made me actually appreciate it a little bit more. So that's kind of what I like getting out of these episodes. So
That's great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
thanks for coming on. This added a lot to it.
Yeah. So what do you guys have for like social media plugs and that kind of stuff?
Boone, you're the big you're the big self-promotion guy.
Oh yeah, you know me, great at self promotion. I'm at or invite on everything, social media wise. Very very streamlined, easy to find on the Twitter, Instagram. Facebook is just me, Boone. Nothing too crazy. You can find me on IWTV for ICW No Holds Barred. It's a wrestling thing, for those of you that are not wrestling fans.
And you can go on linktr.ee/orinvite and find his Instagram, Twitter, links to the merch, D&DDT podcast that we do together, a little wrestling folks getting together to play D&D. And you can find me at Huey Beard Walks. My dog's name is Huey. I have a beard. We go on walks. Or you can find all of the wrestling adjacent things at Heel Turn Radio on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or check out our twitch.tv/Heel Turn Radio, where we stream D&D. We stream Heel Turn Radio podcast. We do Dive Club remotely since we can't go to actual dive bars. We get together and play Jackbox games with friends and do wrestling watch-alongs and all sorts of other fun stuff.
Weren't you painting minis this week?
Yeah, every other week we do Tiny Meng Tuesdays with Ben and my brother Dave and Matt Lind, one half of Enhancement Talent Gear and Clothing. Every Tuesday we do, or every other Tuesday we do 7 to 9, because they all do figure customization as well as like miniature painting. So yeah, the three of them get on and talk about wrestling and comics and all sorts of other fun stuff. It's really zen just to like hear them, and people come on and ask them questions about customizing, and yeah, it's fun. We're trying a little bit of everything, just with all of our wrestling friends since we can't be together in person. So yeah, and you can hear us, Oren, and a bunch of our friends, Worrier and Ref Dan Fitz and Joel and Nate, our friend. We all play D&D together at dnddt.com. We have our 100th episode of our D&D game coming up, so it's crazy.
Nice. Yeah, and like we don't mention it every episode, but it's always in the description. Like, your brother was actually the one who created the logo for us.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Great job on that too.
Yeah.
Cheyne, what's your plugs?
Yeah, so if you have not had enough anime fill for you, I do a podcast, just started a podcast with my buddy Carl called The Anime Niacs. Currently, we are watching My Hero Academia and discussing that. We do have some plans for a few other animes. We might kind of jump around a little bit, but we're hoping to get through a bit of My Hero before we start moving about. But check
Fire
that
Force.
out. Oh yeah, Plus Ultra. But check that out. Fire Force does look really good. I haven't watched that one yet.
Fantastic.
Check that out on. You can find it on SoundCloud. It should be on Stitcher as well. And then I don't really have any social media things to follow.
Yeah. And as always, you can find me at Knocked Out Films on Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. We do have a Miyazaki and me Twitter account that I basically just post the episode and then just leave it because I don't like Twitter.
Well, now I have to go follow that.
Yeah.
And then for next episode, we will be discussing Poko, which will be Takahata's first not truly slice of life that he does. Takahata really only does slice of life. Even Poko is kind of slice of life, even though they are giant raccoons. But yeah, come check us out for that.
Yep. Thanks everybody for listening.
Be good to each other.